Imagine waking up tomorrow with perfect predictive power. You know exactly what your partner will say before they speak, which stocks will rise, when a stranger will smile at you on the street. Not through supernatural means, but through perfect pattern recognition, seeing the hidden scaffolding behind all human choices. Would this knowledge make you powerful? Certainly. Wealthy? Undoubtedly. But would it make you human? This is not merely a philosophical question. In laboratories across the world, scientists are mapping the invisible geometry of human behavior, the underlying patterns that, despite our cherished belief in free will and individuality, make us surprisingly predictable. From the digital footprints we leave online to the unconscious micro-expressions that flash across our faces, we are constantly broadcasting our next moves to those who know how to read the signals. Dr. Elena Quintero stands in her neuroscience lab at Stanford, surrounded by screens displaying brain activity in real time. Most people believe they are unpredictable, she says, adjusting the parameters on her display. They would be wrong. When my subject thinks they're making a random choice between two options, I can predict their decision with 83% accuracy up to 7 seconds before they consciously decide. She points to a pattern of neural activity lighting up in the prefrontal cortex. Their brain has already decided. They just don't know it yet. The implications are staggering. If our most personal choices, what we buy, who we love, how we vote, follow predictable patterns, what remains of human agency? And more urgently, who owns the algorithms that increasingly predict our behavior better than we can ourselves? The search for behavioral patterns is as old as humanity itself. Ancient diviners studied animal entrails, medieval astrologers charted celestial movements, and Victorian phrenologists measured skull bumps, all attempting to decode the patterns that might foretell human action. But today's pattern hunters wield tools of unprecedented power: artificial intelligence, big data analytics, and insights from evolutionary psychology, behavioral economics, and neuroscience. We are not as mysterious as we like to believe, explains Dr. Marcus Levine, behavioral economist at the University of Chicago. When properly analyzed, human behavior shows remarkable regularity across cultures, time periods, and circumstances. The illusion of unpredictability comes from the complexity of the patterns, not their absence. Consider how Amazon knows what you might buy next, how Netflix predicts which shows will keep you watching, or how political campaigns micro-target voters with uncanny precision. These predictions work because, despite our self-image as autonomous individuals, humans follow patterns shaped by evolutionary history, cognitive biases, social dynamics, and neurobiological constraints. The quest to map these patterns has unleashed both breakthrough discoveries and profound ethical dilemmas. Can we preserve privacy in a world where our behavior is increasingly transparent to algorithms? Does predictability undermine free will or simply redefine it? And perhaps most troubling, who benefits when human behavior becomes programmable? Christina Garcia, an ethicist specializing in behavioral prediction technologies, frames the central paradox. The more accurately we can predict behavior, the more effectively we can influence it. This creates an asymmetric power relationship between those who control predictive systems and those being predicted. As we navigate this new frontier, one question looms. Are we decoding the patterns that make us human, or creating new patterns that will remake humanity itself? Our journey into the hidden architecture of human behavior begins with a surprising truth. The most powerful predictors of what you'll do next aren't what you might expect. Deep in the Serengeti, a lioness stalks her prey with mathematical precision. She maintains exactly the same distance until the moment to strike. This is not conscious calculation, but evolutionary programming perfected over millions of years. Humans, despite our sophisticated brains and cultural complexities, follow similar biological programs, though we rarely recognize them. 90% of human behavior can be predicted through biological rhythms we share with other mammals. explains chronobiologist Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka at the University of Tokyo. These rhythms operate at multiple scales, from millisecond neurological responses to seasonal hormonal cycles, creating a temporal architecture that shapes our decisions, emotions, and social interactions. The most obvious of these rhythms is our circadian cycle, the roughly 24-hour pattern governing sleep, alertness, and metabolism. This internal clock influences everything from cognitive performance to moral decision-making. Studies show judges issue harsher sentences before lunch when blood glucose levels are low. Investment decisions made in the morning differ systematically from those made in late afternoon. Even our susceptibility to persuasion follows predictable daily patterns. Dr. Evelyn Thompson's research at Columbia University demonstrated how circadian rhythms predict consumer behavior with remarkable accuracy. We analyzed 28 million credit card transactions across different time zones and found distinct temporal patterns in purchasing behavior. People buy different products at different times of day, regardless of convenience factors. The same person who purchases practical household items in the morning is significantly more likely to make indulgent, pleasure-oriented purchases in the evening. This discovery has revolutionized digital marketing. Companies now time their advertisements to match not just demographics but chronotypes. Your personal circadian pattern. Morning chronotypes, early risers, and evening chronotypes, night owls, respond differently to identical messages depending on alignment with their biological rhythms. Beyond daily cycles lie deeper chronobiological patterns. Women's monthly hormonal fluctuations influence not only reproductive behavior but consumer choices, risk tolerance, and social preferences. One controversial study found that women are more likely to wear red or pink clothing during ovulation, a subtle but detectable signal of fertility that influences how others respond to them. Men experience less obvious but equally influential hormonal cycles. Testosterone levels in male executives predict risk-taking behavior in financial decisions. One hedge fund now reportedly tests its traders' hormone levels daily to optimize investment strategies. Seasonal rhythms add another layer of predictability. Suicide rates peak in spring. Relationship breakups cluster seasonally, with distinct patterns for short-term versus long-term relationships. Even creativity follows seasonal arcs, with problem-solving abilities shifting predictably throughout the year. What makes these biological predictors so powerful is their universality, explains evolutionary psychologist Dr. Rachel Winters. Cultural conditioning can mask these patterns but rarely eliminates them. A Japanese businessman and a Kalahari forager share the same fundamental biorhythms, creating cross-cultural predictability despite surface differences in behavior. Perhaps most fascinating are the ultra-fast biological rhythms occurring beneath conscious awareness. Microsaccades, tiny, involuntary eye movements occurring 1 to 2 times per second, reveal attention patterns that predict consumer choices up to 30 seconds before conscious decision. Pupil dilation signals emotional engagement before the person recognizes their own feelings. Heart rate variability predicts stress responses and decision quality. These biological signals have become the foundation for predictive analytics in settings ranging from courtrooms to casinos. Chinese facial recognition systems now claim to detect criminality through subtle biometric markers. American retailers track pupil dilation and gait analysis to identify shoplifters before they steal. Dating apps analyze voice patterns to predict romantic compatibility. Edward Quinn, a former security consultant, developed algorithms for Las Vegas casinos that track microscopic facial expressions to identify card counters and advantage players. The face reveals everything, Quinn explains. We developed a system that detects the 43 facial microexpressions cataloged by psychologist Paul Ekman. These expressions occur in 1/25th of a second, too fast for conscious control but easily captured by high-speed cameras. The system proved so effective at predicting behavior that Nevada gaming authorities eventually restricted its use, fearing it gave casinos too much advantage. Quinn then adapted the technology for counterterrorism applications, creating controversy around pre-crime detection systems deployed in airports and transit hubs globally. As these biological predictors become increasingly sophisticated, new questions emerge about determinism versus free will. If our behaviors follow such predictable biological patterns, do we have genuine choice? Or is free will itself just another biological algorithm, a useful fiction produced by our brains to motivate behavior? Dr. Quintero offers a nuanced perspective. Predictability doesn't negate choice. It contextualizes it. Understanding the biological clockwork that influences our decisions doesn't eliminate freedom. It gives us the option to work with or against these patterns consciously. Yet, as we chart ever more precise maps of human biological predictability, we must confront a disturbing possibility. Perhaps our cherished unpredictability was never more than a comforting illusion, a story we tell ourselves while our bodies and brains run their ancient programs with clockwork reliability. On September 11, 2001, as terrorist attacks unfolded in New York and Washington, cell phone activity across America spiked in a pattern that precisely matched mathematical models of human panic behavior developed years earlier. The models, created by network theorist Dr. Albert Laszlo Barabasi, predicted not just call volumes but the decay curve as the initial shock subsided, a pattern that followed a precise power law distribution. This is social mathematics, the hidden equations governing collective human behavior. While individuals may seem unpredictable, aggregated human actions follow surprisingly regular patterns. From traffic flows to stock market movements, from riot dynamics to fashion trends, human collectivities obey mathematical principles that often bypass conscious awareness. Human social systems demonstrate emergent properties similar to those in physics, explains Dr. Nathan Chun at MIT's Human Dynamics Laboratory. Just as water molecules follow simple rules that collectively create complex phenomena like whirlpools or waves, humans following basic social instincts generate predictable large-scale patterns. Consider how information spreads through social networks. Despite the apparent chaos of viral content, information diffusion follows mathematical models with 93% accuracy. Whether a social media post will go viral can be predicted within its first hour by analyzing structural features of early sharing patterns. These predictions work because collective attention follows power laws that remain consistent across cultures and contexts. Even more surprising is the mathematical regularity of innovation adoption. In 1962, sociologist Everett Rogers formalized the diffusion of innovations theory, showing how new ideas spread through populations following a predictable S-curve. Slow initial adoption, sudden acceleration when reaching approximately 16% penetration, then gradual saturation. This pattern has successfully predicted adoption rates for technologies from smartphones to solar panels, behaviors from mask wearing to meditation practices. The stability of these patterns contradicts our intuition about social unpredictability, notes Dr. Sophia Patel, computational sociologist at Oxford. We think social change is chaotic, driven by random events or visionary individuals. But the timing and shape of change follows mathematical regularities, even when the specific content varies. Social physics also governs physical movements. Human mobility patterns, from daily commutes to migration flows, follow predictable mathematical distributions. By analyzing anonymized cell phone data from 100,000 individuals, researchers at Northeastern University found that human movements have a 93% predictability rate. Despite believing our paths are freely chosen, most people follow habitual routes with minimal variation. Perhaps most counterintuitive are the mathematical patterns governing creativity and cultural production. Even artistic expression, supposedly the domain of maximum unpredictability, follows discernible patterns. Musical hit songs, successful films, and best-selling books all contain structural elements that can be quantified and predicted. The hit song science, developed by companies like Platinum Blue Music Intelligence, analyzes mathematical patterns in melody, harmony, tempo, and cadence to predict commercial success with accuracy rates exceeding 80%. Similar algorithms now evaluate screenplays and manuscripts, identifying structural patterns that predict audience engagement. Even language usage follows mathematical laws. Zipf's law, discovered in the 1930s, demonstrates that word frequency distributions follow a precise mathematical pattern across all human languages. The most common word in English, they, appears approximately twice as often as the second most common word, 3 times as often as the third most common, and so on, creating a perfect power law distribution that holds across languages as diverse as Mandarin and Swahili. These linguistic patterns are so reliable that we can use them for authorship attribution and fraud detection, explains computational linguist Dr. Emily Winters. Everyone has a linguistic fingerprint patterns in word choice, sentence structure, and punctuation usage that remain consistent across contexts. The mathematical nature of social behavior extends to seemingly emotional domains like friendship formation. Sociologist Mark Granovetter's research on the strength of weak ties revealed mathematical principles governing social network formation. Close relationships follow the inverse square law. Emotional intensity decreases with the square of the distance in social space. Even romantic relationships obey mathematical principles. Psychologist John Gottman developed equations predicting relationship stability based on the ratio of positive to negative interactions, with a minimum 5-to-1 ratio required for relationship survival. His models predict divorce with over 90% accuracy after observing couples for just 15 minutes. These social mathematics enable powerful prediction. Target famously identified a teenage girl's pregnancy before her father knew, based on subtle changes in purchasing patterns. Political campaigns use psychographic targeting to identify persuadable voters through mathematical analysis of social media behavior. Law enforcement agencies employ predictive policing algorithms that forecast crime patterns at the neighborhood level. The ethical implications are profound. When social behavior becomes mathematically predictable, it becomes programmable, warns Christina Garcia. Understanding these equations means knowing which inputs create desired outputs in human systems. Indeed, this mathematical predictability has spawned a new industry of choice architecture, the deliberate design of environments to nudge collective behavior in predetermined directions. From casino layouts optimized for maximum spending to social media feeds engineered for addiction, mathematical models of human behavior enable increasingly sophisticated behavior manipulation. As we map the social equations governing our collective movements, we confront an unsettling paradox. The very mathematical predictability that enables social cohesion also makes us vulnerable to algorithmic control. Our social mathematics, the equations written into human connection itself, may be both our greatest strength and our most exploitable weakness. Every time you open your smartphone, an invisible clock starts ticking. Within 15 seconds, sophisticated algorithms will have predicted whether you will check social media, read news, or send a message. Within 30 seconds, they can predict how long you will use the device before putting it down. These predictions, accurate to within seconds, form part of your digital shadow, the data doppelganger that tracks your behavior online and increasingly shapes your behavior offline. Your digital shadow knows you better than you know yourself, explains Dr. Lucas Wright, former data scientist at a major social media platform. By analyzing patterns in seemingly trivial data, typing speed, scrolling patterns, time between clicks, we can predict major life events from pregnancy to job changes months before users take any conscious action toward these goals. The predictive power of digital shadows extends far beyond consumer behavior. In 2017, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania demonstrated that Facebook likes predict personality traits more accurately than spouses or family members. With just 300 likes, their algorithm could predict a user's responses to a personality questionnaire better than their husband or wife could. Digital platforms have weaponized this predictive power through what former Google design ethicist Tristan Harris calls persuasive technology. systems engineered to modify behavior through psychological manipulation. These systems predict not just what you might do, but what might change what you might do. The algorithms don't just respond to your behavior, they anticipate and shape it, explains Dr. Mira Chun, digital ethnographer at Northwestern University. They're constantly running A/B tests to determine which subtle changes, a notification timing, a color shift, a word choice, will most effectively modify your behavior. This capability creates what legal scholar Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism, an economic system built around the prediction and modification of human behavior. The most valuable commodity in this system is what Zuboff terms behavioral surplus, the data that predicts future behavior with ever-increasing accuracy. The predictive patterns harvested from digital behavior have revealed surprising correlations. Credit scoring companies now analyze how quickly you scroll through terms of service agreements. Slower, more methodical readers have better loan repayment rates. Dating apps track not just who you swipe right on, but how long you linger on each profile, using these hesitations to build predictive models of attraction patterns you may not consciously recognize. Even your smartphone's accelerometer data, the seemingly meaningless information about how you hold and move your device, contains predictive patterns. Researchers at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology demonstrated that gait patterns detected through smartphone accelerometers can identify individuals with 95% accuracy and predict mood states, intoxication levels, and even deception attempts. The most powerful predictors often come from data people don't realize they're generating, notes Edward Quinn, who now consults on digital privacy. Most users worry about the content they actively create, their posts, photos, and messages. But the most revealing data is behavioral, duration, sequence, timing, and intensity patterns that reveal cognitive and emotional states. These digital shadows have expanded beyond the screen. Internet-connected devices in homes, workplaces, and public spaces create continuous behavioral tracking. Smart speakers analyze voice patterns to detect mood changes and health conditions. Connected vehicles track driving behavior to predict accident risk. Workplace surveillance systems predict productivity fluctuations and potential employee departures months in advance. The predictive capacity of these systems increases exponentially when different data streams are combined. Alone, your location data might reveal little. Combined with purchase history and search queries, it enables prediction of major life changes. Target famously identified pregnant customers through subtle changes in purchasing patterns, buying unscented lotion, supplements, and certain cotton balls, before many had announced their pregnancies. Some applications of these predictive systems appear beneficial. Healthcare algorithms analyze medication adherence patterns to predict and prevent treatment lapses. Financial services use behavioral patterns to detect fraudulent transactions with increasing accuracy. Educational platforms predict student disengagement before academic performance declines. But the power asymmetry created by predictive algorithms raises profound concerns. When corporations can predict your behavior better than you can yourself, the concept of informed consent becomes meaningless, argues Christina Garcia. How can you meaningfully agree to terms of service when the company offering them can predict with mathematical certainty what will make you click agree? This asymmetry extends to political and social manipulation. Cambridge Analytica famously leveraged psychographic profiles built from digital shadows to target persuadable voters with tailored messaging during the 2016 U.S. presidential election and Brexit referendum. Their predictive models identified not just who might change their mind, but precisely which emotional triggers would most effectively influence each individual. The digital shadow's predictive power comes from what data scientists call pattern recognition in high-dimensional space. Traditional statistical methods examine correlations between a few variables. Modern machine learning algorithms identify patterns across thousands of variables simultaneously, detecting subtle relationships invisible to human analysis. The human brain evolved to recognize patterns in three-dimensional space, explains Dr. Elena Quintero. But your digital behavior exists in a mathematical space with thousands of dimensions. Algorithms can detect patterns in this high-dimensional space that human intuition cannot grasp. This creates a troubling scenario where those who control predictive algorithms understand human behavior better than humans understand themselves. When TikTok can predict with 85% accuracy which video will keep you watching longest, or Amazon can predict your next purchase before you've considered buying it, human autonomy faces an unprecedented challenge. As digital shadows grow more comprehensive and predictive algorithms more sophisticated, we approach what futurist Yuval Noah Harari calls the algorithmic self, a condition where algorithms know our preferences, predict our choices, and ultimately shape our identity more effectively than conscious deliberation. The mathematical patterns extracted from our digital shadows reveal an uncomfortable truth. The self-aware, autonomous individual of Western philosophical tradition may be largely illusory. Beneath our sense of agency lies a complex but predictable system of responses, a system that becomes increasingly transparent to those with the computational tools to decode it. In a laboratory at Harvard University, volunteers participate in what they believe is a study on memory. Unknown to them, researchers are actually measuring something else entirely. Their unconscious behavioral scripts, the invisible patterns that guide actions without conscious awareness. The study reveals something remarkable. When primed with words related to elderliness like Florida, bingo, and gray, participants subsequently walk more slowly when leaving the lab. They have unconsciously adopted behavioral characteristics associated with the elderly, with no awareness of the influence. This is the unconscious script, the hidden programming that shapes behavior through associations, norms, and environmental cues operating below the threshold of awareness. These scripts, once identified, provide powerful predictors of human behavior across diverse contexts. 95% of human behavior runs on autopilot, explains social psychologist Dr. Vanessa Harmon. We have this narrative that we consciously deliberate before acting, but brain imaging studies show that most decisions activate motor regions for action before conscious awareness occurs. Consciousness is often more like a spokesperson explaining decisions after they've been made rather than the executive making them. These unconscious scripts operate through several mechanisms. Priming effects, as in the Harvard study, occur when environmental cues activate associated concepts and behaviors. Framing effects emerge when the same information presented differently yields predictably different responses. Status quo bias creates a predictable preference for existing conditions regardless of their objective value. Marketing professionals have leveraged these unconscious scripts for decades. Retail environments carefully control temperature, music tempo, and scent to activate purchasing scripts. Restaurant menus strategically position high-margin items in visual sweet spots. Political campaigns craft messages that trigger specific identity scripts rather than rational policy evaluation. But the science of unconscious scripts has expanded far beyond marketing. Healthcare researchers have identified how hospital environments activate either sick roll or recovery scripts through subtle environmental cues, affecting patient outcomes. Educational psychologists have documented how classroom arrangements trigger either collaborative or competitive behavioral scripts in students. Perhaps most powerful are social norm scripts, the unwritten rules governing behavior in specific contexts. These scripts predict behavior with remarkable accuracy across cultures. Despite cultural variations, human social interactions follow consistent patterns organized around status, affiliation, and group boundary maintenance. We've identified universal behavioral scripts that operate across cultures, explains anthropologist Dr. Jason Reynolds. For example, status acknowledgement scripts, the subtle behaviors that recognize social hierarchy, appear in all human societies, though their specific manifestations differ. Once you understand these scripts, behavior becomes highly predictable even across cultural boundaries. These unconscious scripts reveal themselves through subtle behavioral cues. Microexpressions, facial movements lasting 1/25th of a second, leak emotional states despite attempts at control. Postural echoing, the unconscious mirroring of another person's body position, signals social affiliation. Voice modulation patterns, changes in pitch, tempo, and volume, reveal status relationships within groups. Law enforcement and security agencies have developed sophisticated systems to detect deception by identifying disruptions in these unconscious behavioral scripts. The Transportation Security Administration's SPOT, screening passengers by observation techniques, program trains officers to recognize subtle deviations from baseline behavioral scripts that may indicate deception or threat. When someone violates their unconscious script, their behavior becomes visibly effortful, explains former FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Robert Feldman. Authentic behavior follows fluid action sequences. Deceptive behavior requires conscious monitoring that creates micro-hesitations, non-congruent emotional displays, and asynchronous movement patterns. The predictive power of unconscious scripts extends to consumer behavior, political affiliation, and even romantic attraction. Speed dating studies reveal that partner selection decisions occur within milliseconds of meeting, driven by unconscious scripts processing facial symmetry, vocal qualities, and movement patterns. These initial script-driven reactions predict relationship outcomes more accurately than stated preferences or compatibility metrics. Even moral judgments, seemingly the product of careful ethical reasoning, follow predictable unconscious scripts. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt's research demonstrates that moral reasoning typically occurs after the judgment has been made, functioning as post hoc justification for intuitive responses. These moral intuitions follow predictable patterns based on political orientation, with conservatives and progressives prioritizing different moral foundations. We can predict with roughly 80% accuracy how someone will respond to a moral dilemma based on their political orientation, Haidt explains. Progressives prioritize care and fairness foundations. Conservatives give relatively more weight to loyalty, authority, and sanctity. These unconscious moral scripts operate automatically before conscious deliberation occurs. Perhaps most disturbing is how easily these unconscious scripts can be hacked. Behavioral scientists have identified techniques to bypass conscious reasoning and directly activate behavioral scripts. Casinos use operant conditioning principles to maximize gambling behavior. Social media platforms employ variable reward schedules to create addiction-like engagement patterns. Political campaigns use identity threat cues to trigger tribal voting scripts rather than policy evaluation. Dr. Quintero's neuroscience research reveals why these unconscious scripts hold such power. Conscious processing is energetically expensive, she explains. The brain evolved to conserve energy by automating routine decisions through unconscious pattern recognition. This creates predictable decision shortcuts that worked well in ancestral environments, but can be systematically exploited in modern contexts. As we map these unconscious scripts with increasing precision, new ethical questions emerge. If behavior flows primarily from unconscious programming rather than conscious choice, what becomes of concepts like responsibility and consent? If those with advanced knowledge of these scripts can systematically influence behavior, how do we ensure this power is not abused? Cristina Garcia frames the challenge. Understanding unconscious behavioral scripts gives us a kind of superpower, the ability to predict and potentially influence behavior while bypassing conscious awareness. Like all superpowers, this raises questions of responsibility. Who should have access to these insights, and what limits should govern their application? The science of unconscious scripts reveals a profound but uncomfortable truth. The conscious, deliberative self we identify with may be more narrator than author of our actions. Beneath our awareness, these invisible scripts run their programs with algorithmic precision, making our behavior far more predictable and potentially programmable than our subjective experience suggests. When homicide rates in Bogota, Colombia dropped 70% between 1993 and 2002, politicians initially credited tougher law enforcement, but subsequent analysis revealed something unexpected. The most significant factor wasn't policing but environmental interventions. Improved street lighting, redesigned public spaces, and normalized business hours for bars and nightclubs. By altering environmental variables, city planners had changed the behavioral equation. This exemplifies the environmental equation, the mathematical relationship between physical surroundings and human behavior. Unlike biological or psychological factors that operate internally, environmental factors create external conditions that predictably shape actions across populations. Human behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum, explains urban psychologist Dr. Rebecca Martinez. It occurs in physical contexts that enable, constrain, and channel action in predictable ways. Change the environment and you change behavior, often more effectively than by trying to change minds. The science of environmental behavior prediction has roots in psychologist Roger Barker's behavior settings theory from the 1950s. Barker documented how specific physical-social settings, like basketball games or church services, generated remarkably consistent behavior patterns regardless of which individuals occupied them. The setting itself seemed to program behavior. Modern research has expanded this insight into precise mathematical models. Heat mapping studies show how architectural features create predictable movement patterns in public spaces. Circulation paths in shopping malls follow formulas based on entrance placement, visual landmarks, and ceiling height. Even interpersonal distance, how closely people stand to one another, follows predictable equations based on cultural background, relationship type, and environmental context. These environmental equations explain behavioral patterns across diverse settings. Hospital design influences recovery rates and medication errors. Classroom arrangement affects participation patterns and information retention. Factory layout impacts productivity and workplace injury rates. Perhaps most striking are the environmental equations governing criminal behavior. Crime pattern theory, developed by environmental criminologists, demonstrates how physical spaces create or prevent criminal opportunity through predictable mathematical relationships. Crime isn't randomly distributed across time and space, explains criminologist Dr. Marcus Kennedy. It follows specific spatial-temporal patterns created by the convergence of motivated offenders, suitable targets, and absence of capable guardians. These patterns are so reliable that we can predict crime hotspots with 85% accuracy based purely on environmental variables. This insight has revolutionized crime prevention through environmental design, CPTED, modifying physical environments to reduce criminal opportunity. Strategic lighting placement, sightline optimization, territorial reinforcement through landscaping, and natural access control through pathway design have reduced crime rates more effectively than increased policing in multiple studies. The environmental equation extends beyond crime to prosocial behavior. Charitable giving increases 30% when donation boxes are placed near mirrors or images of watching eyes, activating unconscious social surveillance scripts. Recycling rates double when bins are placed at eye level rather than requiring bending. Healthy food selection improves when positioned at eye level in cafeterias. These environmental influences operate largely outside conscious awareness. Eye tracking studies reveal that people navigate spaces using unconscious attention to environmental cues they cannot later recall. Movement patterns follow predictable paths of least resistance created by physical layout, with conscious destination goals accounting for only about 40% of pathway choices. The predictive power of environmental equations has transformed retail design. Supermarkets place high-margin impulse items at eye level in checkout lanes, a position that increases purchasing probability by 35% compared to below-knee placement. Department stores create forced circulation patterns that maximize exposure to high-margin merchandise. Fast food restaurants use hard seating and specific color schemes to increase table turnover rates. Digital environments operate by similar principles. Website designs manipulate visual hierarchy to direct attention in predictable patterns. App interfaces employ desire paths, interaction flows that align with users' natural attention patterns. Social media platforms create infinite scroll environments that eliminate natural stopping cues, exploiting the environmental principle that behavior continues until interrupted by friction. Physical and digital environments share core principles, explains interaction designer Dr. Jason Lee. Both create action affordances, environmental features that suggest specific behaviors, and both can be optimized to predictably channel attention and action through strategic friction reduction or addition. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the power of environmental equations on a global scale. Social distancing floor markers, one-way circulation paths in stores, and plexiglass barriers created new behavioral patterns with minimal need for conscious compliance. Environmental interventions proved more effective than information campaigns in modifying public health behaviors. Dr. Evelyn Quinn's research on choice architecture, How Decision Environments Shape Choices, reveals just how powerful these environmental equations can be. Simply changing the order of food items in a cafeteria increases healthy choices by up to 25% without any educational intervention, she explains. The default option on forms, whether organ donation is opt-in or opt-out, changes participation rates by over 40% across populations. These insights have profound implications for freedom and responsibility. If environmental factors so strongly predict behavior, can we hold individuals fully accountable for actions substantially determined by their surroundings? Conversely, do those who design environments bear moral responsibility for the behaviors their designs predictably produce? Cristina Garcia argues for an environmental ethics framework. Those who control environmental design, from urban planners to social media engineers, are writing behavioral code that executes through human actions. This represents a form of power that requires ethical constraints and democratic oversight. The science of environmental prediction has already transformed practices across fields. Healthcare facilities now employ evidence-based design to reduce medical errors and improve patient outcomes. Educational spaces use environmental psychology principles to optimize learning engagement. Workplace design incorporates behavioral mapping to enhance productivity and well-being. Perhaps most controversial are the hostile architecture applications, environmental modifications designed to prevent specific behaviors by making them physically uncomfortable or impossible. Examples include segmented benches that prevent lying down, blue lighting in public restrooms that makes veins difficult to see, deterring intravenous drug use, and high-frequency sound devices that repel teenagers from public spaces. Environmental prediction can be used for control or empowerment, notes urban planner Dr. Sarah Jenkins. The same principles that allow us to design out crime can be used to design in community, creativity, and human flourishing. The question isn't whether we should shape behavior through environment. We inevitably do, but toward what ends and with whose participation. As we decode the mathematical relationships between environment and behavior with increasing precision, we face a fundamental reconsideration of human agency. If our actions are substantially determined by environmental equations operating outside conscious awareness, perhaps freedom lies less in immunity from influence than in democratizing the power to shape the environments that shape us all. In a windowless room at a major technology company, a team of data scientists gathers around a dashboard displaying a real-time prediction engine. The system isn't forecasting weather or stock prices. It's predicting human behavior with unprecedented accuracy by integrating multiple pattern recognition systems into a unified predictive framework. The breakthrough came when we stopped treating different predictive domains as separate, explains Chief Scientist Dr. Adam Forrester. Biological patterns, social mathematics, digital shadows, unconscious scripts, and environmental equations don't operate in isolation. They form an integrated system where each domain reinforces and modifies the others. This integration represents the frontier of behavioral prediction, the algorithmic future where comprehensive models combine multiple pattern recognition approaches to forecast human actions with extraordinary precision. These systems don't just predict behavior, They predict how behavior will change when different variables are modified. Traditional behavioral science looked for correlations between a few variables, notes Dr. Elena Quintero. Modern predictive systems identify patterns across thousands of variables simultaneously, capturing the complex interaction effects that actually drive human behavior. The potential applications span every domain of human activity. Healthcare systems now predict not just disease risk but treatment adherence, integrating biological markers, psychological profiles, social network factors, and environmental influences. Financial institutions forecast loan repayment behavior by combining traditional credit data with behavioral patterns extracted from digital activity, social connections, and even typing patterns on application forms. Law enforcement agencies have developed predictive policing systems that forecast crime patterns at increasingly granular levels, not just which neighborhoods will see increased criminal activity, but which specific blocks and time windows. Some controversial systems even claim to predict individual recidivism risk by integrating criminal history with behavioral, social, and environmental factors. Marketing has perhaps advanced furthest in implementing these integrated predictive systems. Major retailers create predictive personas that forecast not just purchasing patterns, but how those patterns will change in response to life events, social influences, and environmental modifications. These systems enable anticipatory shipping, sending products to distribution centers nearest to customers likely to order them before the order is placed. The real power comes from moving from passive prediction to active intervention, explains marketing strategist Victoria Chin. We don't just forecast what customers might do. We identify the specific interventions most likely to modify their behavior in desired directions. This shift from prediction to modification represents the frontier of behavioral algorithmic systems. Social media platforms employ sophisticated engagement optimization algorithms that continuously adapt content presentation to maximize user attention. Dating apps adjust match presentation sequences based on real-time engagement patterns. Smart home systems modify environmental factors like lighting and temperature to influence mood and productivity. The predictive accuracy of these integrated systems far exceeds earlier approaches. While single-domain prediction might achieve 60 to 70% accuracy, integrated systems regularly exceed 90% for many behavioral forecasts. This accuracy comes from what data scientists call transfer learning. Insights from one behavioral domain improving prediction in others. Human behavior is holistic, explains Dr. Quintero. When we predict both biological patterns and digital behavior, each prediction strengthens the other. The integration creates a multiplier effect on predictive accuracy. This multiplier effect becomes especially powerful when predictive systems incorporate real-time feedback loops. Traditional behavioral models made static predictions based on historical data. Modern systems continuously update their predictions based on immediate behavioral responses, creating dynamic models that adapt to changing conditions. Edward Quinn, now advising companies on ethical uses of behavioral prediction, explains the implications. These systems don't just learn what worked yesterday. They learn what's working right now. The predictions become increasingly accurate over time as the algorithms identify which patterns remain stable and which require contextual modification. The corporate and governmental deployment of these integrated predictive systems has accelerated rapidly. Amazon's recommendation engine integrates over 500 behavioral variables to predict purchasing patterns. Netflix claims its content recommendation algorithm saves the company $1 billion annually by accurately predicting viewing preferences. China's social credit system integrates multiple behavioral data streams to create comprehensive citizen profiles used for resource allocation and access permissions. We're approaching a world of ambient predictability, suggests futurist Dr. Amara Johnson. As sensors multiply in our environments and predictive models grow more sophisticated, human behavior becomes increasingly transparent to these systems. The question isn't whether behavior can be predicted, but who controls the predictive machinery and to what ends. Cristina Garcia frames the ethical challenge. Predictive asymmetry creates power asymmetry. When organizations can predict individual behavior better than individuals themselves, traditional notions of autonomy, consent, and privacy require fundamental reconsideration. This predictive asymmetry has sparked growing debate about algorithmic governance, the rules and oversight mechanisms for behavioral prediction systems. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, established early guidelines, including the right to explanation for algorithmic decisions and restrictions on automated decision-making. But governance remains far behind technological capabilities. Current regulatory frameworks focus primarily on data collection rather than predictive inference, what organizations can extract from data they legitimately possess. As predictive models grow more sophisticated, they can generate increasingly accurate behavioral forecasts from seemingly innocuous data, circumventing existing privacy protections. The regulatory challenge isn't just about what data is collected, but what predictions that data enables, explains legal scholar Dr. Michael Chun. Current frameworks don't adequately address how organizations can use legitimate data to make predictions that effectively circumvent privacy and consent principles. Beyond regulatory concerns lie deeper questions about human identity and agency in an algorithmically predictable world. If our behaviors follow patterns that algorithms can detect with increasing accuracy, what remains of human uniqueness? If our future actions can be forecast before we decide on them, what becomes of free will? Dr. Quintero offers a nuanced perspective. Predictability doesn't negate freedom. It contextualizes it. Even highly accurate predictions represent probabilities, not certainties. The space between probable and actual behavior, the prediction error, is where human creativity and agency may ultimately reside. Indeed, some researchers have begun exploring algorithmic resistance, deliberate behavior pattern disruption to confound predictive systems. These approaches range from individual tactics like randomizing online activities to collective movements advocating predictive privacy as a fundamental right. The algorithmic future isn't predetermined, argues digital rights activist Elijah Turner. As prediction systems grow more powerful, countervailing forces emerge, both technological and social, that preserve spaces for unpredictability and genuine choice. As we navigate this algorithmic future, perhaps our greatest challenge lies in harnessing predictive power while preserving human dignity. The same systems that can manipulate and control can also empower and liberate. Behavioral prediction could enable personalized education that adapts to individual learning patterns, preventive healthcare that identifies risk factors before disease manifests, and resource distribution systems that anticipate needs before crises occur. The choice isn't between accepting or rejecting an algorithmically predictable world, but between different visions of how that predictability shapes human flourishing. As the patterns that govern human behavior become increasingly transparent to our analytical tools, we face an unprecedented opportunity to understand ourselves, and an unprecedented responsibility to use that understanding wisely. As our journey through the hidden patterns of human behavior concludes, we confront a fundamental paradox. The more accurately we can predict behavior, the more we question the very nature of human identity and freedom. If our actions follow discernible patterns, biological rhythms, social equations, digital footprints, unconscious scripts, environmental influences, what remains of human uniqueness and agency? This question transcends academic philosophy. It shapes how we design institutions, technologies, and relationships in an increasingly predictable world. The patterns we've explored reveal humans as both more predictable and more complex than traditionally understood, governed by mathematical regularities yet capable of pattern-breaking innovation. The paradox of human behavior is that predictability and creativity coexist, reflects Dr. Elena Quintero. The same neural mechanisms that create habitual patterns also enable us to recognize and occasionally break those patterns. Our brains are prediction machines that sometimes predict their own predictions and choose differently. This capacity for metacognition, thinking about our own thinking, may represent the frontier between predictability and freedom. While algorithms can predict behavior with increasing accuracy, they struggle to model how humans respond to awareness of those predictions. This creates what philosophers call a reflexive loop, where knowledge of a prediction can alter the behavior being predicted. When people learn they're being predicted, they sometimes deliberately violate those predictions, explains philosopher Dr. Thomas Weller. This isn't just resistance. It's an assertion of human distinctiveness, our capacity to recognize patterns and occasionally transcend them. This distinctively human characteristic appears across domains. Creative breakthroughs often involve pattern recognition followed by pattern violation. Scientific discoveries frequently emerge when researchers notice anomalies in otherwise predictable data. Even everyday problem-solving involves identifying habitual responses and occasionally choosing alternative paths. Cristina Garcia sees profound ethical implications in this human paradox. If what makes us distinctively human is the capacity to recognize patterns and occasionally break them, then technologies and institutions that reduce this capacity, that make behavior more automatically predictable, may undermine something fundamental to human dignity. This perspective reframes debates about behavioral prediction and influence. Perhaps the ethical question isn't whether behavior should be predictable, but whether predictions enhance or diminish our capacity for self-awareness and deliberate choice. Prediction systems that operate without transparency, that manipulate without consent, or that narrow rather than expand behavioral options may undermine this distinctively human capacity. The most ethical prediction systems are those that make their predictions transparent to the people being predicted, argues Edward Quinn. Systems that show us our patterns can enhance rather than diminish our autonomy by making unconscious habits visible for conscious evaluation. This suggests a potential reconciliation of predictability with freedom, what philosopher Mira Kant calls informed autonomy. In this view, genuine freedom doesn't require immunity from patterns or influences, but awareness of them and capacity to engage with them consciously. The opposite of manipulation isn't absence of influence, but transparent influence that respects agency, explains Dr. Kant. Prediction systems that reveal rather than conceal their operation, that empower rather than exploit pattern recognition, may actually enhance human autonomy. Some innovators are already developing technologies aligned with this philosophy, what they call predictive empowerment, rather than predictive control. These systems make behavioral patterns visible to users, enabling conscious engagement with habits and tendencies that might otherwise operate unconsciously. Health applications show users their biological rhythms and behavioral patterns, enabling more informed decisions about sleep, exercise, and nutrition. Financial tools visualize spending patterns and predictable decision biases, helping users align financial choices with long-term goals. Educational platforms reveal learning patterns and attention cycles, enabling more effective study strategies. The future of behavioral prediction isn't just about organizations predicting individuals, suggests Dr. Amara Johnson. It's about individuals using predictive insights to better understand themselves, a democratization of pattern recognition that enhances rather than diminishes human capacity. This democratization of predictive insight represents a potential path forward, not rejecting the predictability of human behavior, but ensuring that predictive power is widely distributed rather than concentrated in corporate or governmental entities. When individuals can access and understand their own behavioral patterns, prediction becomes a tool for self-knowledge rather than external control. As we navigate this future, perhaps our greatest challenge lies in developing what Cristina Garcia calls predictive wisdom, the capacity to use pattern recognition ethically and humanely. This wisdom acknowledges human predictability without reducing humans to their patterns, recognizes behavioral regularities while respecting individual dignity, and leverages predictive insights for human flourishing rather than exploitation. The patterns are real, concludes Dr. Quintero. We are more predictable than our subjective experience suggests. But that predictability doesn't define us completely. In the space between pattern and choice, between prediction and action, we find something that remains irreducibly human, our capacity to know ourselves and occasionally surprise ourselves. In this recognition lies perhaps the most profound insight from our exploration of behavioral patterns. That being human means being both pattern-following and pattern-breaking, both predictable and surprising, both algorithmic and creative. Our patterns don't diminish our humanity. They provide the very structure within which human creativity and choice become meaningful. As we harness ever more powerful tools to decode the hidden architecture of human behavior, we would do well to remember that the map is not the territory, the pattern is not the person, and the prediction is not the future. In the space between what algorithms can predict and what humans actually do lies the ongoing mystery and dignity of human experience, a paradox to be respected rather than resolved. In the end, perhaps the most human pattern of all is our perpetual oscillation between habit and innovation, between the predictable grooves of established behavior and the unexpected leaps of creative action. Understanding this pattern doesn't eliminate it. It invites us to engage with it more consciously, more ethically, and more humanely. And in that engagement, we might find not the end of human unpredictability, but its most meaningful expression. The most powerful pattern we've discovered may be this: that humans are creatures who discover patterns in everything, including themselves, and in that discovery find not limitation but possibility.